In an ideal world, each defense would look like this. It would be solid and intact. But in reality, each defense is like this. It has holes in. And the same is true for all the other defenses. All the defenses have holes in them.
You are watching Maximus Aviation.
So if you spend any time at all studying or watching videos about aviation, or more importantly, aviation safety and disasters, then chances are you've heard of the Swiss cheese model or theory. And sadly, we were all able to witness a perfect real-life display of the Swiss cheese model in action recently with a collision over the skies of Washington, D.C. between an American Airlines CRJ-700 passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. And while we think of that phrase, Swiss cheese model, as a theory crafted a long time ago at the dawn of aviation or industry, it's actually a relatively new model that entered our lexicon. It was only back in 1991 that the Swiss cheese model was introduced to the world by Professor James T. Reason, who was a renowned professor in safety psychology at the University of Manchester in the UK. And he created and published the Swiss cheese model theory in his 1991 book, Human Error. In his book, he refers to accidents happening because of many separate but interconnected factors, yet not due to any one specific error or factor. One of the many examples he cited in his book was the 1986 Challenger disaster. The Swiss cheese model is a complex linear safety model of accident causation used in several industries such as aviation, engineering, healthcare, and manufacturing for risk analysis and risk management. The model is a representation of human systems. It depicts slices of cheese stacked side by side. Each slice represents the defenses of a system that is designed to prevent safety errors from occurring. While each of our defenses should remain intact, there are unintended weaknesses in every industrial safety system. These weaknesses are represented as the holes in the cheese. But if an error occurs and breaks through a hole in one slice, it doesn't usually result in an adverse outcome because there are other defenses in place to prevent the adverse outcome. However, when each hole aligns in multiple slices, meaning that all the defensive layers have been broken, it is then that disaster can and most likely will occur. Obviously, it's the holes in the Swiss cheese model that represent the weakness within the system. And while physical or mental breakdowns or even negligence in any given system can lead to a catastrophe, there is an even greater threat to safety, especially in aviation, and that threat is success. Because it's been about 15 years since the United States saw its last fatal commercial accident, and it's that kind of success that can lead to complacency, lulling us into a false sense of security. Long ago, the great heavyweight champ Muhammad Ali was asked if he was ever afraid of getting hurt in the ring, and Ali's answer was a perfect analogy on the subject. He said, "Life is a gamble. Yeah, you can get hurt, but people die in plane crashes and lose their limbs in car accidents." He said, "People die every day." But Ali said, "You just don't let yourself believe that it will ever happen to you." So in the case of this recent deadly mid-air collision 15 years after the safest period in aviation America has ever seen, especially with the rise of technology, we got complacent, and collectively we thought that disasters the rest of the world still suffer, well, that they could never happen here. And like I said, success can be far more dangerous than failure. Okay then. So what were the holes in the Swiss cheese that lined up to create the perfect incubator for this most recent disaster? Swiss cheese hole number 1, the airport itself. DCA or Ronald Reagan Airport has been an accident waiting to happen for years. The overworked airport has been plagued by far too many near-miss encounters in recent years. DCA was designed to accommodate the traffic of 14 million people a year. However, last year, 25 million passengers came through DCA. And in a 2023 analysis of the busiest runways in the U.S., the second most traffic runway after Ronald Reagan's Washington primary runway was at Los Angeles International Airport, which had an average of 781 flights per day. But that runway is twice as long. Add in DC's government buildings and military aviation traffic, then you have a recipe for a disaster. Still, near misses have become more common at DCA in recent years, with 503 significant air traffic control lapses recorded in 2023 according to FAA data, which was a year-on increase of 65%. Swiss cheese hole number 2 was a fateful decision made by the crew of the American jet. However, this was no fault of their own, just a fateful roll of the dice. Because as you can see, there was a traffic jam coming into runway 1 that night. As a matter of fact, the plane directly in front of the American plane was another CRJ, and the tower asked them if they would take runway 33 instead, but the crew said no. That crew didn't want the more challenging, shorter runway, so they continued on to the longer runway number 1. Actually, that night, ATC was asking every other plane if they would take runway 33 due to the heavy traffic. However, when they asked the American crew if they would take runway 33 after a long pause of over 20 seconds, the crew finally said yes, they would take 33, which was the much shorter runway with a much more demanding approach. Sadly, had they also refused like the plane in front of them did, they would have never collided with the Army helicopter. But like I said, it was no fault of theirs, but it was just another hole in the Swiss cheese. Then we have the helicopters around DCA, a constant and ever-present danger at that airport. And you may ask, why does the military have nighttime training drills in one of the most densely trafficked air corridors in the world? Well, here again is that complacency factor. They've been doing it for years, and there have been near misses with these Blackhawks in the past. But it's that it will never happen to me mindset. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But according to the ATC recordings, the helo crew said they, quote, had the CRJ in sight. However, not only did they not have it in sight, but it has been revealed that sources said that the pilot did not stick to the pre-approved route and was a half a mile off course, as well as flying at an altitude above 300 feet, at 400 feet. Yet no one in the control tower seemed to notice or be paying attention. So there are a few more holes in our Swiss cheese. However, I'm sure the deeper this investigation goes, they're going to find many more holes that lined up that night. Okay, so far, between the moonless night, the overcrowded airspace, the fateful runway decision, the Blackhawk's wrong altitude and failure to recognize the CRJ, that was all bad enough. But then we have, well, at least in my opinion, the last and final hole in the cheese that sealed the fate of all those killed that night, and that is the air traffic control element. According to insiders and a preliminary internal FAA report, that night an air traffic controller was reportedly allowed to leave their post early, just before American Airlines Flight 5342 collided in midair with the Army Black Hawk helicopter. That night only one air traffic controller was left to handle both helicopter traffic and manage planes, which should have been a divided duty. Those tasks are usually handled between 2 people from 10 a.m. until 9:30 p.m. according to the report. After 9:30 p.m., the duties are typically combined and left to one person as the airport sees less traffic later in the night. But for some reason, a supervisor reportedly decided to combine those duties before the scheduled cutoff time and allowed one air traffic controller to leave work early. According to the FAA, the staffing configuration was not normal for that time of day and volume of traffic. But as of now, it remains unclear why the supervisor allowed the workers to clock off early on Wednesday night just before the mid-air collision. And according to a New York Times report, the DCA control tower had only 19 fully certified controllers, which is a third lower than the target of 30 controllers set by the FAA. Furthermore, in May of 2024, there was nearly a collision between an American Airlines jet and a small airplane at DCA. And there was another near miss in April 2024 between Southwest and JetBlue airplanes. Additionally, Reagan has runway configurations that are no longer used in contemporary airports with intersecting runways. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that the airport's main runway is half the length of the standard 13,000 feet, resulting in the compact scheduling for takeoffs and landings. However, despite all of that, in 2024, Congress allowed the airport to yet again increase its number of daily flights from DCA. In August of 2023, Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia told the Alexandria Times that every 30 to 60 seconds a flight was taking off and landing. He said he saw firsthand how short and busy the runway is with no room for expansion. And on top of all that, the FAA is being sued in a class action lawsuit alleging it turned away nearly 1,000 air traffic control applicants solely based on their race. The lawsuit represents nearly 1,000 people who went to school to become air traffic controllers, which for about 20 years until the end of the Obama administration, graduated 100% of the people who went on to work in their field. The lawsuit was brought on after the Obama administration said the class was, quote, too white, and threw out all the tests with the applicants. The lawsuit is continuing to make its way through the courts. But again, this investigation has a long way to go, and I'm sure many other holes in the Swiss cheese model are sure to arise. However, like I said, this terrible tragedy is a real and present example of just how this unique Swiss cheese model theory has been an effective avatar, not only for aviation safety, but all facets of business and industry. But the silver cloud in this terrible tragedy is that we humans need a wake-up call from time to time, especially after long periods when we have been lulled into a false sense of security. Because history has proven that as soon as we start thinking it can't happen to us, well, it usually does. So with that, please be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you enjoy the content on my little channel, I sure hope you'd consider subscribing and maybe give us a like while you're at it. And as always, until next time, yeah, this is Maximus.